The story of Gulliver in Lilliput. Gulliver was a very healthy boy who ate a great deal and so grew big and strong. He was a very keen traveller and had set off in search of adventure on many occasions. One day he set sail again, but this time, when he was in the middle of the ocean, a great storm arose and the ship went down. Gulliver found himself all alone in the sea, clinging to a piece of wood and thinking that this voyage would be his last. Days went by during which he drifted along on the waves, which carried him to a beautiful island. When he arrived on the shore, he saw that everything was very tiny. "How extraordinary! Everything is so exceedingly small!" he exclaimed. When he went walking on the island, a multitude of little midgets swarmed all over him, overpowering him in an instant, and leaving him tied up so that he could not move. To ensure that he could not escape, the whole guard turned out to watch over him and observed him intently all the time. Then, seeing that Gulliver was in a peaceful frame of mind, they released him and took him before the king, who said to him, "I will free you if you will help us." "I am at your Majesty's service. What would you like me to do?" asked Gulliver. "Our vessels and coasts are attacked by pirate ships that will not let us live in peace. We need to rid ourselves of them," replied the king. "Trust me, great king, we shall defeat them." When he caught up with the pirate ships, he dealt with them all in no time at all. Those that were not shipwrecked fled in terror at the sight of that giant who could sink a ship with one finger. "We must get away!" shrieked the terrified pirates. When they were utterly vanquished, Gulliver returned to Lilliput, where a great reception awaited him. The midgets gave him all kinds of presents, and his victory was celebrated throughout the island. "Long live Gulliver!" they cried, and everyone was very happy. The king was so grateful to him for saving them from the pirates that he granted him his liberty and had a ship built for him. It was a monumental task for them. The inhabitants of Lilliput were very sorry to see him go, because they wanted him to stay forever and protect them from their enemies. But that could not be, and after voyaging for many days, our friend finally returned to his own country. The Tale of Alice in Wonderland. One day Alice went on a trip to the country, and when she had walked about and played a great deal, she fell asleep under a tree. Suddenly she saw a rabbit who was running along with a large watch in his hand. "He is so elegant, he must be going to a party," thought Alice. "I will go with him." Alice followed the rabbit, who ran and ran until he came to a hollow tree which he entered. And Alice, without thinking, went in after him. Down and down she fell. At last she came to a beautiful garden where the flowers spoke to her. "Have you seen a rabbit around here?" asked Alice. "No," said the flowers. Alice continued her journey through Wonderland. On her way, she was invited to take tea with the Mad Hatter and the March Hare. "Would you like some doughnuts, little girl?" asked the Mad Hatter. Although she asked lots and lots of questions, Alice did not find the rabbit. Then suddenly she saw him running in the distance and set off after him. "This time he will not get away," she thought. Alice followed the rabbit and arrived at a strange gathering where there was a Queen of Hearts, and there too was the rabbit, looking at her in alarm. The Queen said in a very loud voice, "We shall have to change this little girl into a playing card." And then she added, "Seize her!" Alice was terrified when she heard those words, and then she woke up. It had all been a dream. To her surprise, she found she was still in the place where she had fallen asleep. The story of Pinocchio. Geppetto, a friendly old man, gave the final touches to a puppet he had just finished. "How fine he has become! He will be called Pinocchio. If only he was real," said the old man, for he had no son of his own. These words, so lovingly spoken, were heard by a magic being, and that night a fairy called at Mr. Geppetto's workshop, and seeing how nice Pinocchio was, wished to reward the artist by bringing his puppet to life. How happy Geppetto was the next day when he entered his workshop. Pinocchio was laughing, walking, moving about, and even talking, just like all the other children. Pinocchio went to school because Geppetto wanted him to be a very clever boy. He was accompanied by his friend, Jiminy, the good-natured cricket. However, it happened that Pinocchio made friends with two naughty boys, and instead of going to school, he went off to have fun with them and do mischief. "What fun! This is better than going to school!" cried Pinocchio. Pinocchio went out of the house in search of adventure, and as he stopped learning, he grew 2 enormous donkey ears. One day, Jiminy Cricket read a newspaper article which said, "Mr. Geppetto, who had gone in search of his son Pinocchio in a sailing boat, has been swallowed up by a whale." Pinocchio went to sea to rescue Geppetto. When he caught up with the whale, he asked it to give him back his father. But, it opened its great mouth and swallowed up Pinocchio as well. At last, Geppetto was reunited with his beloved Pinocchio, but in the stomach of the whale. Pinocchio, who was very clever, tickled the stomach of the whale with his enormous donkey ears, and when the whale sneezed, out shot the 2 of them. They went home safe and sound, and Pinocchio went to school every day and never got up to mischief again. His fairy godmother, to reward him for his goodness, turned him into a real flesh and blood boy with blonde hair and rosy cheeks. And that is the end of this story. The Tale of the Homeless Squirrels. Mother Squirrel and her little ones were without a home and did not know where to turn because, with a single stroke, a brawny woodcutter had chopped down the tree in which they lived. "What will become of us?" wept Mother Squirrel. Mother Squirrel threw her arms around her little ones, but she could not stop wailing. Peter the Woodcutter marched along with his axe over his shoulder, in the mood for chopping down all the trees in the wood, one after another. "Tra-la-la, tra-la-la, I'm off to work today," sang Peter happily on his way through the wood in full bloom. Zap, zap rang out through the silent wood. It was Peter's axe chopping down tree after tree as he worked tirelessly on. "Timber!" he cried. He didn't care if they were inhabited by friendly little squirrels and other animals who had so lovingly built their homes in them. "Neighbor, neighbor!" cried a terrified little squirrel. "What's the matter?" exclaimed another squirrel, opening the door of her house. "The heartless woodcutter is in sight. I think he's coming here. Oh, how dreadful!" A squirrel watchman on his usual beat in the wood came upon the woodcutter and caught him red-handed. "Aren't you sorry for what you are doing?" he said to him. "Oh, and who are you?" asked Peter in surprise. And Mother Squirrel, too, came up to him sobbing and said, "This is my house, and my little ones are inside. If you chop down this tree, we shall have no home." "Please forgive me. I never thought of that," cried Peter, full of remorse. Actually, although Peter was a happy-go-lucky sort of chap, his heart was in the right place. From that day onwards, the little squirrels marked all the trees that the woodcutter could chop down, because they were not occupied. That way, he would not be short of wood, and nor would our little friends be homeless. "I'll paint this red," said the squirrel, "so that Peter will not miss it and it will not be chopped down, for this is where my little ones live." And so it was that all the little animals lived happy and contented, and helped the good woodcutter to carry away his timber. Peter was also very happy, surrounded by his friends the squirrels. At last peace reigned in the wood. No more crying and sobbing was heard, because there were no more homeless squirrels now. The story of Sinbad the Sailor. Young Sinbad lived in great poverty in the city of Baghdad, thinking of ways in which he would make the great fortune he so much longed for. He made up his mind to go to sea and then set sail. The voyage started pleasantly enough, but some days later a great storm blew up, and the ship was sunk by an enormous wave. Fortunately, Sinbad was able to cling to a piece of wood and let the current carry him along. The journey was not very comfortable, but clinging tightly to his piece of wood, Sinbad succeeded in reaching a wonderful island. As he set foot on it, Sinbad wondered what he would find in this unfamiliar spot. In order to get a better view of the island, he climbed up a high palm tree, and in the distance he made out an enormous bird's egg. It belonged to the roc, the most gigantic and fabulous bird of the Orient. "Oh!" exclaimed Sinbad, "if only I could get hold of that egg, I should have plenty to satisfy my hunger." While he was pondering how he could eat up that great egg, he suddenly felt himself being carried through the air at high speed. The bird carried him through the air for some time, then suddenly let go, and he fell into the middle of a great heap of precious stones. Oh, but oh dear! The treasure was guarded by a serpent who, on seeing Sinbad, opened up its great jaws and was about to eat him up. But Sinbad, very astutely, succeeded in tricking the serpent and escaped. But not before he had filled his pockets with those precious stones. Luckily, a whale just happened to be passing by and took him back at full speed to Baghdad, where Sinbad distributed his immense fortune among the poor. The story of Snow White. In a far-off land there lived a very beautiful queen who had a stepdaughter called Snow White. "Tell me, magic mirror, which of us is the most beautiful?" "Snow White is the most beautiful, my queen." The wicked queen ordered a servant to take Snow White to the forest and put her to death. But the poor man had not the heart to do it, and told her to hide in the forest. "I cannot do you any harm, lovely princess. Hide in some place where your stepmother will never find you." Snow White ran into the thickest part of the forest and walked for many long days, until she came upon a tiny little house. "This will be my salvation," said she. The princess thought that in such a lovely place as that there must live very kind people who would give her shelter. The house, which at that moment was empty, was in a state of complete disorder. The furniture and everything inside was small. "How tiny it all is! This house must be inhabited by dwarfs." Snow White cleaned and tidied the little house until it shone. Then she lay down exhausted on one of the little beds and fell fast asleep. When she woke up, she found herself surrounded by 7 little dwarfs, who, on hearing what had happened to her, promised to protect her from her evil stepmother. "We will take care of you." "You can be our little mother." "Now we shall not need to do any more cleaning and washing," they cried. "Oh, what a nuisance all that is!" They were all very happy and contented. One day the queen, who had heard that Snow White was still alive, disguised herself as an old woman and invited her to try an apple which she had poisoned. "Take it, my pretty." The princess was tempted by the lovely apple the old woman was offering her. "I don't know if I ought to," said she doubtfully. The old woman insisted, assuring her that she had nothing to fear, until at last she accepted. But when she bit into the apple, Snow White fell senseless on the ground, and how those dwarfs cried and cried. A prince who was passing by saw the beauty of Snow White and kissed her on the forehead, whereupon she wakened from that bad dream, and the dwarfs were happy again. Snow White and the prince married and lived happily ever after. The story of a little donkey for a car. Jimmy, who was a nature lover and admired all that was beautiful, lived in a pretty little house in the country. He lived on the vegetables that he planted and grew for himself, and he did all these things with the help of his friend, the little donkey. But unfortunately, nobody is satisfied with what he has, and he thought, "This little donkey is very slow and can't carry very much." While he was on his way home, Jimmy had a fantastic idea. "If I were to exchange him for one of those cars they have in the towns that go so lovely and fast, I should be a real man about town and could visit distant towns and cities." The poor little donkey was aware of the bad intentions of his master and was very sad. There came a day when he changed the little donkey for a car and happily decided to go for a drive with some very nice company. "Bap, bap," sounded the horn of the car, which had some handsome gilt headlamps. "Faster, Jimmy!" cried his friends, impatient to be off. The little donkey was left behind, sad and alone. He felt very hurt that he had been deserted. He could not keep back his tears at the thought of his friend bowling along in his modern four-wheel car. "Bye-bye, Jimmy," sobbed the donkey. "You soon forgot about me." Jimmy could not have been more happy driving along, when suddenly nuts and bolts began coming out on all sides. "Goodness, what is happening?" "Oh, the car is falling to pieces!" he cried. That was what happened when he changed his little donkey for that noisy old car. There was absolutely nothing he could do to get it going again. It would not do as it was told. Laughed his friends. "Where is Jimmy's car now?" The little donkey bore him no ill feeling and welcomed him back with a friendly bray. "My old dear little donkey, how I have missed you! You will do anything I want for a handful of grass, but that old car won't do anything, not even for the best biscuits." And so our young friend learned the truth of that old saying, "Better the devil you know." The story of how the stars rain down. Once upon a time, there was a poor little orphan girl. She was so poor that she had nowhere to sleep. One day she met a poor old man who said to her, "Give me a morsel of bread. I am dying of hunger." She had only one piece of bread, but she was a very generous little girl, and she gave it to him and went on her miserable way. A little later she met a boy who was crying and saying, "I am so cold. My head is so cold. Give me something to cover myself with." The little girl took off her cap and gave it to him. Then she met a little girl who had no dress and nothing to cover herself with. The poor little thing was weeping bitterly and shivering with cold. Our friend took pity on her and gave her her own dress. "Here, take it," she said. "It may be old, but it is wool, and it will keep you warm." On and on she went until she came to the forest, where she met another little girl who was quite naked, and asked her for the little vest she was wearing. The little orphan thought to herself, it will soon be night time, so no one will see me." She took off her vest and gave it to her. It was the only thing she had left. "Thank you," said the little girl and went away. She prepared to spend the night in the forest. She was numb with cold, but satisfied that she had been able to help others less fortunate than herself. Suddenly, in the distance, she saw some stars that seemed to be coming nearer. "What pretty stars!" she said to herself. She had never seen them so close before. The stars came lower and lower until they fell into the hands of the little girl, and when they touched her, they turned into gold coins. That is how the little girl received her reward from heaven. Our Lord, moved by the good deeds she had done, had taken pity on her and sent her the golden coins so that she would never be poor again and could go on doing good to others. New fashions for the Martians. It is not just on Earth that people discuss fashions, but also on a far-off planet called Mars. The inhabitants said to each other, "Don't you think our costume is getting a bit out of date? We have been dressed like this for thousands of years." These words were spoken by a friendly little Martian. "How you could be right," cried another little Martian. "We could go to Earth and dress ourselves in all the very latest things," said a third. No sooner said than done. They jumped into their flying saucer and set off towards our planet. They could not wait to see what kind of clothes people were wearing on Earth. They touched down without incident, keen to get on with the job. "Look, that must be the latest style," said one of the little Martians. "It looks a little bit queer to me," exclaimed another. "How can the Earthman manage without tripping up?" added a third. "I think it would be better if we could see where he was going." "This little tailor could make us suits in the very latest style." "Yes, he looks to be a very conscientious worker." Charlie was quietly sewing away without noticing that he was being watched through the window by some very special customers. The three little Martians knocked on his door and introduced themselves to our friend Charlie, who was very frightened and asked, What can I do for you?" "We are inhabitants of Mars and would like you to make us some suits like the other ones that are worn on this planet, for the ones we are wearing now are out of date." Charlie set to work and began to measure them up. "Height 1/2 meter and a bit less for the rest. Width? That will be fine." The little Martians were surprised and alarmed by all these preparations, but very anxious to see the results. But when the suits were done, they were very pleased, and also with the new haircuts Charlie gave them. How smart I feel now. When they see us on Mars, our friends will doubtless want clothes like ours too." They were so happy and contented with their new suits and their fine haircuts that they set off for Mars in their spaceship. "Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye," shouted the little Martians from their flying saucer. And that is how the very latest fashions found their way to the very distant planet, thanks to Charlie. The story of the Sawdust Dolls. My friends, you will have noticed how nice mechanical toys are, and dolls that walk and talk. But an old man called Boniface had not realized this. He thought that his sawdust dolls were the very nicest in the world, and looked lovingly on all of them. Old Boniface lived solely for his beloved dolls, and knew nothing about the very sophisticated mechanisms of the new toys. He went on as always, making sawdust toys out of old scraps of colored materials. They were miserable dolls with their little bodies full of stitches. But the children did not like them, because they were disfigured with stitches and had gloomy faces. "What will become of me if I cannot sell my beloved toys?" wept poor Boniface. When Boniface went to market to sell his dolls, he spent hour after hour there without selling a single one. He returned home wet and numb with cold, thinking that he would surely sell something another day. But many days went by with the same result, until at last Boniface stopped taking them out. And there they were, all the dolls, put aside and forgotten in an old cupboard. Day after day, those friendly toys, made by the old man with such loving care, felt neglected. However, one night a little elf came in at the window and took pity on the old man and the toys. One by one he touched them with his magic wand, and the seams and sawdust stuffing disappeared in an instant. They were so happy to feel their hearts beating in their chests that they sang songs of merriment and joy. "Now we are the most beautiful and unusual dolls in the world," sang Bunny contentedly. The next morning, on seeing such a marvel, the old man felt very happy. "Oh," he exclaimed, "my toys have turned themselves into the finest and the best in the world." "I want this one. Give me that one." And so, with the help of that tiny little elf, the children fought to buy those splendid dolls into which the old man had put so much love. The story of Aladdin and his wonderful lamp. One day Aladdin was walking through the wood when he saw a man kneeling in front of a tree with a large hole in its trunk. When he saw Aladdin coming, he said to him, "If you go in there and bring me the lamp you find at the bottom, you can take anything you like." Aladdin went down into the trunk of the tree and saw marvelous treasures. "Take what treasure you like, only bring me the lamp," said the man from above. But Aladdin, suspecting that the man was a magician and that the lamp was very valuable, refused to come out. Then the magician became very angry and left the young man shut inside the tree. Aladdin, seeing no hope of rescue, inadvertently rubbed the lamp, and instantly there appeared a genie, who said to him, "Master, what is your will?" Aladdin, very surprised, asked him to release him from the tree. Immediately he found himself back at the house, and at his feet were trays filled with choice delicacies to eat. "Look, mother, look what I've brought you. From now on we shall want for nothing, for I have found a wonderful lamp in which lives a genie who can do anything." "How lovely, my son! If it is so, we shall be able to give a present to our king, who is so very kind to all his people." The next day, when Aladdin was presenting rich gifts to the king, he saw the princess, whose singular beauty persuaded the young man to ask for her hand in marriage. "You can marry her if, as a wedding gift, you build a marble palace in a single night," replied the king. Thanks to the genie, Aladdin built the palace at the appointed place and married the princess. They lived very happily until one day the wicked magician, hearing of the happiness of Aladdin and knowing he was away, took advantage of his absence to present himself at the palace. He tricked the princess by exchanging the wonderful lamp for a new one. As soon as he had the genie in his power, the magician ordered him to carry the palace far away to another land. When Aladdin returned, he saw to his horror what had happened. He rose up on the magic carpet he had found in the enchanted tree and went in pursuit of the magician until he caught him. He gave him what he deserved and returned to his country with his beautiful princess, the wonderful lamp, and the marble palace. There they reigned happy and contented for many years. The Tale of Timmy the Elf. Timmy was an elf who lived in a wonderful wood. He had for company his little friends, the woodland animals, and his house was a beautiful toadstool in which he was happy and contented. Early in the morning, he did his chores, sweeping, dusting, washing his clothes, and he always had plenty of helpers around. "What a lovely day it is," said Timmy. "Today I shall get all the washing dry." In his spare time, he amused himself playing with the animals in the wood, for he was so tiny that he could play all kinds of games. "Look how Timmy is amusing himself," cried some friendly little mice. But Timmy did not at all like being so small, and one day, in search of aid, he went to consult the wizard and said to him, "Please, Mr. Wizard, make me very tall so that I can tower over everybody else." The wizard gave him a magic potion to drink made from mysterious herbs, and suddenly Timmy started to grow and grow. "Wow!" cried Timmy, very contented. "It works! I am a giant!" His first reaction was one of joy at seeing his wish come true, and then he saw to his great sorrow that he could not get into his little house, and that all his little friends were frightened of him and hid when they saw how big he was. Oh dear, being a giant is not as nice as I thought. Now I can't get into my little house. A very woebegone Timmy went back to consult the wizard and said to him, "Please turn me back to my original size again. I am so enormous. I have nowhere to live, and my friends don't want to play with me." "So now you are sorry you wished to be something you were not, aren't you?" The wizard took pity on Timmy and returned him to his normal size. A very contented Timmy was now able to go back and play with his little friends, and after that experience, he never entertained such ambitions again. What fun it is to go for a ride high up on a tortoise! Not everyone can do that, can they? The story of a day in the country. Looking forward to spending a happy day in the country, Peter and Anna got into their magnificent car and set off at full speed. "Bap, bap," said the horn when Anna went round a bend. "Don't go so fast, Anna, I'm frightened," said Peter, very scared. "What a banquet we are going to have," said Anna, looking at the appetizing sandwiches and not intending to leave a single mouthful. "I'm so hungry after that fright I had in that car that after the sandwiches I shall eat up all the fruit," said Peter. "I'm so hungry too. I shall eat up the sandwiches 3 at a time," said Anna. But not everything Anna and Peter did that day was good, for they lit a fire and went calmly away without putting it out. "Poor us," said the animals. "What will become of the wood and our children?" wailed a little tortoise. The fire, which a few moments before had only been a few little embers, was turning into a great blaze. "We're done for," cried the terrified rabbits. "Quick, quick," urged the birds. "The whole wood is going to burn." All the little animals were doing their very best to undo what the children had done, leaving the fire alight without giving a thought to all the living things there might be in the undergrowth. Even the sun was sad and shed little tears in the form of raindrops to try and help the poor little animals. "Oh, how hot it is," said a little caterpillar who had climbed up onto a pretty mushroom. It was not long before the children saw what their carelessness had caused. "Oh!" exclaimed Anna, very frightened. "How awful!" added Peter. "All the trees and places where the animals live are being destroyed." "We must do something to make up for our wicked carelessness." "Yes, yes," urged Peter. "It's horrible." And they set to work to help the poor inhabitants of that wood, for they wished to put right the damage they had done at all costs. "Come on, Peter. There isn't much more to put out. Don't lose heart." Everyone in his own way was contributing his drop of water and doing his humble best. After such an unfortunate occurrence, Peter and Anna restored everything that had been destroyed. They planted the firs, pines, and flowers that make the countryside so beautiful. From then on, the children never ever left the tiniest ember of a fire when they went off for a picnic in the country. What a fright we had that day, didn't we, Peter? "We did indeed, Anna, but what will serve as a lesson to us all and all the other children, won't it?" The story of the little lead soldier. Among the many toys piled in one little boy's room, there was a very brave little lead soldier who had taken part in many battles and had lost a leg in one of them. He was very resplendent in a colourful uniform with a red tunic adorned with gilt, buttons and braid. One day a pretty dancer appeared in the toy cupboard, and the little soldier was instantly captivated by her beauty. "How lovely she is! What beautiful blonde hair she has, like pure gold!" "Ooh, what a handsome little soldier!" The dancer was also captivated by the little soldier, and they lived very happily together. One day, the boy who lived in the house took the little lead soldier to play with him and left him out in the garden. Night came, and even the moon was sad when he saw the little soldier all alone and shivering with cold in that solitary spot. The next day, the boy came along and picked him up. He could think of nothing better to do than to put him in a little paper boat and sail it along a gutter. "Oh dear, that boat will get wet and I shall go down with it," thought the poor little soldier. "Have a good time," said the naughty little boy. He sailed for hours along all the drains in town. He cruised down rivers and arrived at the sea. Although he was very brave and not afraid of danger, he was worried about his dancer. What would she do without him? Perhaps she would die of sorrow. "Don't be sad, little soldier," said a little mouse who wished to accompany him on his journey. Suddenly the boat sank, and the little soldier found himself at the bottom of the sea, faced by an enormous fish who was about to swallow him up as a juicy titbit. "Oh dear," thought the little soldier. The fish opened his great big mouth and gulped down the little lead soldier. But sometimes the incredible does happen. That fish was caught that same day and taken to market and bought by the cook from the house where our hero had been happy with his dancer. "Oh!" exclaimed the cook, recognizing him. "How on earth did you get into the tummy of that fish?" The cook cleaned him up and took him to the toy cupboard, and the little soldier and the dancer were both so happy to be together again. You are happy too, aren't you, children? The story of Thumbelina. Once upon a time, a very pretty little girl was born, and her mother called her Thumbelina because she was no bigger than a thumb. Because she was so small, she slept in a nutshell with violet leaves for her sheets and pillows. One night, while she was asleep in her little cradle, an ugly toad came in through the window. On seeing little Thumbelina, he said, "At last I have found a lovely wife, ribbit, ribbit." He carried her away to the pond in the garden and placed her on a leaf while he went down below to tidy his home at the bottom of the pond. When she awoke, Thumbelina began to weep bitterly at finding herself all alone in the middle of the pond. A little fish took pity on her and carried her far away out of the reach of that ugly creature and put her down on the bank. A beautiful butterfly who was passing by picked her up, and after flying over valleys and villages, set her down in a wood, where she spent the summer until winter came. It so happened that one day she met a wounded little bird who could not fly. She felt sorry for him and tended him most carefully. When spring came, the grateful bird carried her away to his country, the kingdom of the flowers. When they arrived there, the little bird set her down very gently on a flower, right next to the dwelling of the prince of that country. The prince was so small as she was, with tiny wings on his shoulders. The moment the prince saw Thumbelina, he fell in love with her and asked her to marry him. Thumbelina was delighted to accept. As a wedding present, the inhabitants of the kingdom of the flowers gave Thumbelina a pair of beautiful little wings, so that she could fly round all the flowers that grew there. And so Thumbelina lived happily ever after with her husband the prince and her best friend the little bluebird. The story of Sleeping Beauty. In a far-off land there was born a pretty little princess, to whom they gave the name Aurora. To her baptism came several good fairies, bearing magnificent gifts. But when the third fairy was about to present her gift, there appeared a bad fairy, who said to them, "I am the only person who has not been invited to the baptism, but I, too, come bearing a gift. Ha 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 ha!" The gift brought by the bad fairy was a curse. "When Aurora is 16 years old, she will prick her finger on a spindle and die." Then came one of the good fairies with her gift, and she said, "She will not die. She will only fall asleep until a prince wakes her with a kiss." The princess stayed with her fairy godmothers in a little house in the wood until her 16th birthday. Then they dressed her in fine clothes to go to the palace, where her parents were waiting for her. When she arrived, the princess took it into her head to climb the highest of the towers. And there was the bad fairy, who cunningly said to her, "Come in, my child. Look at this lovely spinning wheel. Would you like to play with it?" When she touched the spinning wheel, she pricked her finger and fell into a deep, deep sleep. The bad fairy left the palace satisfied. When the good fairies found the princess in this state, they wept piteously. One day the fairies met a handsome prince in the wood and said to him, "In that palace there sleeps a beautiful princess. Would you like to see her?" At the sight of the beautiful princess, the prince could not resist giving her a kiss, whereupon she awoke from her slumbers. When the news spread, there was rejoicing everywhere, and everyone prepared to celebrate the wedding of this charming pair.